the danger of the financial sector becoming under the sway of international finance capital is what we saw in 2008 when the global financial crisis took place, when many big banks and financial institutions collapsed in the United States and Europe. But India, we were spared that because our banks and our main insurance sector was in the public sector. So we did not face that type of crisis in 2008. In fact, the credit for that should go to the left parties who, during the Manmohan Singh government, when they wanted to go ahead with opening up all the financial sector institutions, Mr. P. Chidambaram was the finance minister, we had stopped them at every stage, whether it's insurance, whether it's banks, private banks, foreign investment. We did not allow them because we said this will not be acceptable to us. So ironically, the benefit of that went to the Congress party in the Lok Sabha elections in 2009 to say that we have saved our economy and our financial sector because of our policies. It's actually because they wanted to do the opposite, but we prevented them from doing that. The second major consequence of neoliberal policies is on agriculture and our peasantry. We have seen what has happened in the last 2.5 decades. Public investment in agriculture has been steadily reduced, whether it's for infrastructure, whether it's for irrigation, whether it's for producing seeds and so on. All the public investment in agriculture has been steadily curtailed and handed over to the private sector, which has led to the cost of inputs going up in a big way, from seeds to fertilizer to electricity, water, etc. And the third aspect is that the effort to promote the neoliberal reforms actually open up the global market to Indian agriculture. So all the agreements we have signed under the WTO, World Trade Organization, the free trade agreements we have signed or are planning to sign, like the free trade agreement with ASEAN countries, what we are planning to now sign with Europe, all of them, the basic precondition is that we must allow imports of agricultural goods and commodities from outside without any obstruction, without any serious duties, import duties or customs duties. This has led to a flood of agricultural imports of various types, which is also leading to farmers not able to match these cheap imports, and therefore they are actually getting pauperized. Today, rubber. In Kerala, there is a big crisis for the last 6 months because of the crash in rubber prices. But you can get cheap import of rubber. So the tire manufacturers are buying using imported rubber for tire manufacturing. So in various areas, you will find that globalization and the adoption of neoliberal policies will lead to the destruction of the livelihood of farmers and making agriculture itself an unviable occupation. Under neoliberal reforms, the trade liberalization has also had the effect of deindustrialization. That is, you are lifted or reduced drastically import duties and excise duties. So, in vital sectors of industry and manufacturing, where we were developing our own indigenous know-how, technology and manufacturing, they have got adversely affected. There is an article by Ashok Parthasarathy, who used to be the Science and Technology Advisor during Indira Gandhi's time, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. He published an article in the Hindu, I think it was in March 15th of this year, making this point that 25 years of liberalization has led to deindustrialization of India. And he gives various examples. That is, we were developing IT hardware in the 1970s and 80s. But then the Narasimha Rao government decided we will lower the import duties drastically for hardware. We will only develop software. So we have a highly developed software industry without the hardware industry. While Japan has done the opposite. They have concentrated on building the hardware industry first, so that you don't have to depend on foreign companies and technology for IT hardware. So whether it's IT hardware, whether it's optic fiber, whether it is various electronic components, and even heavy electricals. We have a highly developed Bharat heavy electricals. But you are allowing cheap imports from China and other places of power equipment now. So the market share of BHEL has come down by 30% in the last 1.5 decades. So you are actually promoting deindustrialization by accepting trade liberalization. I said that under neoliberalism, the form of state intervention, the role of the state changes. It is not that the state is not there in economic activities, economic policy making, but the nature of that state intervention changes. The state now actively works to transfer resources from the people, transfer the natural resources of the country to a narrow strata of big business and multinational companies. We see that all over the country now in the question of land, transferring land, acquiring land cheaply to hand over to the corporates, dispossession of farmers, displacement of tribal people in mineral projects in a large scale, and so on. The state actively intervenes to ensure this transfer, either free or at dirt cheap prices. Secondly, the state is actually helping the big business class to accumulate more capital through this process. And the taxation policies of this government or successive governments is to ensure that this transfer of wealth and resources to a handful of people. Today, a lot of talk is there about how government is having wasteful subsidies for the people, like in the PDS system, public distribution, food subsidy, how there is so much wastage in fertilizer subsidy, so much wastage in oil subsidy and so on. But nobody talks about the huge subsidies which are given to the rich and to the big business and corporates. In this union budget presented by Arun Jaitley, if you see the figures of the revenue foregone by the government, that is, revenue foregone means either you have written off taxes, given tax concessions, or given other forms of relief. If you take all that into account, in some cases the government has said, okay, this year we won't realize the tax from you for this category, etc. 6.11 lakh crore rupees is the revenue foregone by the government as per this year's budget. That is, last financial year, 2015-16, the government has given up revenue to the tune of 6.11 lakh crores. Out of that, if you see the breakup, I don't want to give you all those details. One small item is 62,000 crores direct tax foregone from corporates alone. That is, corporates who should have paid 62,000 crores of tax in 1 year, they have been given relief, they have been written off. So, this is the way the government actually subsidizes the corporates and the rich. Privatization under neoliberalism does not mean only privatization of the economic sphere, industry, etc., manufacturing. It is privatization in all spheres of society. Now, in every advanced or modern society, there are certain basic services that have to be provided to the citizens. You can call it basic services or essential services. What are those? That is, you have to have a public health system, you should have a public educational system, you should have a public transportation system, you should provide for water, electricity, and so on. These are all what are called as basic services. Now, the neoliberal philosophy is all this which is for the public welfare, all this which is for the public good should be also privatized. Because this, according to the neoliberal philosophy, the market is the best arbiter of what should be delivered to the people. And all citizens becomes customers. They are not citizens. The market will deliver services to the customers. How best to do it, only the market can decide. No government, no municipality, no local body can take that decision. So in India also, we are finding privatization is not only of the public sector, industries or banks, etc. There is a rapid privatization of all basic services, including elementary things like supply of water. As you know, in many cities and towns, they have been contracted out to private companies, including some multinational companies. So this privatization of health services and education, two particularly I want to take up, because what does it lead to? It leads to a highly segmented availability of these basic services to the people. That is, the best education and the best health systems mean you have to pay much more. So, the access to all the basic services get restricted for the common people and to the poorer sections. And this is one of the ways inequality is heightened in our society. That it is not only income inequality or wealth inequality, it is also highly unequal access to health, education, water, power, housing, etc. So, neoliberalism everywhere in the world has brought heightened inequalities. The richest capitalist country in the world is the United States of America. In last 30 years, inequality has grown. Those who are wealthier have grown to be super wealthy, and many in the middle class have gone down to the what we call the poverty level in our country. Not their poverty level is higher than ours, but they are going down to the poverty level. The same thing has happened in Britain, the same thing has happened in most of the European countries. So, the consequences of liberalization is that growth which takes place, economic growth, whatever GDP growth is registered, the benefit of that goes to those who already have wealth and capital, and it heightens the gap between the rich and the poor. This privatization in all spheres has a direct social impact. It transforms social values, how people look at problems in society and values. In the United States of America and many European countries today, prisons, jails are privatized. It is not run by the government, the jail. It is run by private, it is contracted to private companies. Some of you may know that America has the highest prison population, those who are in jail compared to the total population. I can't tell you the exact ratio. It's one of the highest in the world. One of the reasons is the private companies who run jails want more people in jail, because then they get the contract is for each prisoner, they are paid so much to look after them, feed them, clothe them, etc. So more prisoners means more profit. So the judicial system is encouraged to convict for some petty crime which should be a fine. They will convict them for 6 months or 1 year. So the criminal justice system also gets infected by the profit motive of those who run the jails. Because the more people in jail, the more profit for those companies. This is how privatization starts reshaping and molding all the values in society. For lack of time, I shall not take up some other points in this, but go to a new area, which is neoliberal policies are not only in the economic sphere. We think of neoliberal policies as economic policies. No, it is much wider. Neoliberalism embraces the economy, it embraces politics, it embraces, as I said, the social aspect, cultural aspect, every aspect of society. And in India now, after 25 years of liberalization and neoliberal policies, we can see clearly that a neoliberal type of politics has also emerged. I would call it neoliberal politics. And what is that politics? Which is big money has invaded the political system. Big money has actually now corrupted the parliamentary democratic system that was adopted when we became a republic in 1950. That is from top to bottom. You can see it from the panchayat to the parliament, the type of politics and the type of people in politics. There's a big change. That is, I think Andhra and Telangana has been the pioneers in this, in the use of money in politics. You don't find that so much yet in the north. That is, for election at the panchayat level, the amount of money spent in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana is 100 times more than what is, say, spent in Madhya Pradesh or Rajasthan. But what does it mean? The type of people, the political parties, say, take the Telugu Desam party here, which is a dominant party, regional party here. Say, when the Telugu Desam was founded more than 30 years ago, who used to be their candidates for assembly and parliament, say, and today? You'll find that normally today, there are people who have access to large amounts of money. Either they are capitalist entrepreneurs, they're big contractors, they are involved in various business activities. They become the elected representatives. And it's not only the Telugu Desam, I'm just giving an example. The same thing applies to the DMK in Tamil Nadu. That is not only the all India parties, even the major regional parties today, their class interests, the class character of the leadership, the representatives have undergone a basic transformation. That is, sometimes it's very difficult to make out whether For them, politics is business or business is politics. It's very difficult to differentiate that. So you can imagine, if such is the nature of the party and representatives when they come into government, what will be the policies adopted by those governments? Policy making itself becomes subject to the whims and control of this big capital and money at all levels. So that neoliberal politics finally leads to the throttling of democracy, the narrowing of the democratic system or rights that we have. Because ordinary people, ordinary citizens will have no say in what the elected representatives should do or what the government's policy should be. And today we have faced a situation that, except for the left parties, all other parties, there is a consensus that neoliberal policies are good for us. Can you make any difference between the Congress party and the BJP, or the Telugu Desam party and the other regional parties? On economic policy, they are all one, because they are now started representing the interests of those sections and classes which have benefited and prospered under liberalization. So this politics is today posing, according to me, the greatest challenge for us. The challenge to preserve democracy, forget about a left agenda, to preserve democracy, to preserve democratic rights, to ensure that the people have a say in politics and in policy making. This fight has to be taken up in right earnest. The next point I would like to make is that this liberalization and neoliberal politics is what has generated or spawned communalism in a big way in our country. And the rise of Hindutva communalism is directly connected to the advent of liberalization and neoliberal politics. Why do I say so? Again, this is not unique to India. After imperialist globalization took the offensive in the 1980s, we saw all over the world the rise of narrow ethnic identities, extremist religious identities, and also chauvinist nationalist forces or identities. That is, imperialist globalization actually weakened nation states and national sovereignty. And in each country, with the weakening of the nation state, because nation state became more and more succumbing to foreign finance capital, eroding their national sovereignty. In such a situation, the social impact and the political impact was various identities, what I call sectarian identities, got a fillip. This was compounded by the setbacks to socialism, because an alternative to this sort of imperialist globalization or the countervailing power to that was only the socialist countries of bloc. With their failure or with their dismantlement, the sectarian, religious and ethnic identities got full play. And we saw that in the former Soviet Union itself, how ethnic clashes began, religious extremism grew, etc., etc. In our country also, because of the failure of the earlier model of state-sponsored capitalism and its accompanying ideology, which is generally known as the Nehruvian ideology, with that failure, when our ruling classes embraced neoliberalism, we saw this process began actually before 1991. during the Rajiv Gandhi government itself, what is called the new economic policy, opening up had started. We saw it is precisely in that period that the forces of Hindutva communalism started taking the offensive. And we have seen, in one sense, a culmination of that process in the 2014 Lok Sabha election, with the BJP coming to power with Narendra Modi as the Prime Minister. So Hindutva communalism and neoliberalism go hand in hand. They strengthen each other. You will find that the people who say Bharat Mata ki Jai must be raised as a slogan by all people in India. They are the ones who have signed an agreement now with the United States of America to allow our Indian naval bases and airports to be used by American armed forces. So there no Bharat Mata's concern is there. You see, so Hindutva ideology is pro-imperialist, is fully for neoliberalism, and that is what the ruling class of our country are using. Because they know if you have Hindutva coming, people are going to be divided. People are going to be divided on communal lines. And that is the best atmosphere for them to push all these policies, to impose all these policies on the Indian people. So that is why one of the fallouts of this neoliberal process has been the rise of Hindutva communalism, which poses also great danger and threat to our people's unity and our country's unity. The other consequence of this combination of neoliberalism and communalism is this has already brought into play a big attack on the rights of the socially oppressed sections in our society, whether they are women, whether Dalits, and all other oppressed sections. They suffer from this twin attack. One is the growing inequality further marginalizes them and excludes them. And the growing Hindutva offensive, which is basically orthodox, social and religious extremism, it will target the Dalits and other socially oppressed sections because of the upper caste Brahminical worldview and ideology of organizations like the RSS. Therefore, neoliberalism and this process of liberalization has unleashed all these forces. On the one hand, the type of economic growth we have does not lead to employment. It does not lead to growing employment. It increases disparities, both in terms of income and wealth and also regional disparities. And it also has unleashed these socially divisive forces like communalism. So we have to have an all-comprehensive strategy to counter this. And in that, the first point to remember is, we cannot fight neoliberalism by saying that we will end neoliberalism or remove neoliberalism and bring in the earlier phase of capitalism, which was there. We'll go back to that. Or we will bring a reformed capitalism. That's not going to happen. Capitalism also, just like socialism, will not go back to an earlier phase. So neoliberalism can be fought by putting an alternative, and that alternative has to be socialism. It cannot be a better form of capitalism. So what we have to rally the people to fight for, when we fight against neoliberalism, is to present them an alternative, where, of course, there will be immediate issues when the livelihood and rights of the people are attacked. But the alternative policies and program that we place has to be all-embracing. It has to be in economic terms an alternative. It has to be in political terms an alternative. It has to be in social and cultural terms an alternative. And that alternative has to be, according to me, within the framework of achieving or going towards socialism in Indian conditions. So how that is to be done, unfortunately, I cannot spell out now. You may have to call me for another lecture because that will take at least 1 hour for me to spell out what the alternative is. But the struggle against neoliberalism and communalism, which is the crucial task today, we have to undertake that struggle, but we must keep in mind that we must have an alternative. Often we only say we will fight this, we oppose this, but what is the alternative to neoliberalism and communalism in India today in our conditions? That alternative has to be placed. And I think only when we do that will we be true to the legacy of Comrade Makineni Basavapunaiah, who fought in his entire life for social transformation in India. And I think that will be the best tribute we can give him when we can put forth that concrete alternative and take it to the people. Thank you very much.